them some of the things, but I hadn't even thought about the fact that we probably need to be open enough so they can unlearn some of the things, and we can share, even some of those embarrassing stories that we've shared so far or whatever else, and go, hey, this is an opportunity to unlearn the fact that being embarrassed doesn't need to come with 20 years of carrying shame or whatever the scenario is. So yeah, that's a really brilliant way of looking at it.
I love that point about unlearning. And I just wanted to add on to that. And the importance of young adults to invest in the unlearning now before they get to, the older stages when it becomes really difficult. So this is the best time to do that. And what I also wanted to call out is the importance of personal responsibility. No one can do the unlearning. It's only that person is to want it and be committed to the unlearning process. And this is incredibly important in helping us create a better community. It's incredibly important in helping us to be better together, because change will only happen if every person plays their part. So that's the call out to young adults. Do it now. Invest in the unlearning now. That is part of being better together.
Definitely. Now, Chantal, I know you have your hands busy with a bubba, which segues very well into my next question. So I'm hoping you can still unmute yourself. You are the mother of 3 children. You are currently caring, I can actually see you caring for your very, very small, tiny, fresh new baby. But as a mother of 3, what skills do you believe young people need when it comes to having good conversations, let alone better conversations? Like, some of them may be just harnessing some of these skills in their teens and early 20s.
I've got 5 children, Carolyn. I've got a 14-year-old.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, my apologies.
No,
you did say that earlier in our discussion. I've just counted 2 of them.
That's okay. I've got 11-year-old twins. I've got a 6-year-old kinship daughter. So in our community, we sometimes adopt our siblings' children as our own, and they may not always live with us, but she's my kinship daughter. And I have a 3-week-old newborn son. So it's a really good question as to what skill sets to young people. First and foremost, they need adults in their lives who have the courage to role model that. Because first and foremost, the biggest thing I've learnt being a parent is that it's not what you say, it's what you do that is the most important thing when it comes to your children. And my son, my youngest child, is a boy. He is going to get a completely different parent, both culturally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, and a lived experience growing up to what my 3 older children did. Because I was 22 and 25 when I had my other children, and I was unlearning. But also there's this concept of decolonisation that's getting stronger within not just Aboriginal cultures but around the world as well. This process of going, hold on, Western culture isn't the only culture out there, but it's the most dominant one in the world at the moment, especially in the industrialized world. And the fact that, hold on, you want to talk about sustainability, you want to talk about mental health and mindfulness and all this. Why aren't we looking to the oldest living cultures in the world, not just First Nations culture, but cultures that have done community, that have done family, that have done living with the natural world since their inceptions? Why are we not letting go of the ego? Because we've got white males that are still the dominant ones in power, and yet I'm expected as an Aboriginal woman to go and do cultural safety training for 20 CEOs, white males, and hold on, you're psychologically unsafe, so I need to create a safe space for you. But then when I finish that training, I can walk out of the room and pick up my phone and see that another young Aboriginal First Nations young boy has been put in jail. My son is more likely to go to jail than he is to finish school. My girls are more likely to end up victims of domestic violence than they are to finish school. So it's the courage to be able to handle the truth. It's the courage to know yourself, but also to know your limitations. What are your boundaries? What's your capacity and capability to be able to hold conversations? And I think when we know ourselves and the things that we learn from our program, so being able to hold your own story, you're then able to hold space for others. And you spoke about it yourself, seeking to understand as opposed to judge or even to the ability to explain. And that's something we've in our program. I mean, in our program, you've got a woman of African descent who's had all sorts of lived experiences. You've got Gemma, who is a queer woman who's come from England and a teenage mum. I'm a First Nations woman who is fair-skinned. And you bring together those stories and those capabilities. And it was through our conversations that we came up with this idea of the Better Together Collective. But being able to sit in a space, especially at a corporate level, where it's more about productivity than it is about humanity. I think young people, particularly going into these corporate careers and that corporate trajectory, is the earlier they can learn to hold their own story and hold their own truth, will better equip them to be able to hold a space to understand others and difference.
Yeah, that's so true. And not only will it equip them with their peers, and the people that are closest to them, but when the fact that you've used corporate as an example is brilliant to me, because that's often the pathway we're telling kids to take. We're telling them, finish school, go to uni, get a job. Like, we're still telling them that ridiculous story, even though I'm sure that the four of us have taken very different paths in very different directions and then back again and doubled over ourselves and whatever we've done. But we're still telling kids that. We're still telling young people that. And we're telling them to fit in a box. We're telling them to squeeze themselves into the square-shaped peg, and they can't know themselves. And they can't even be comfortable with their own stories. So how can we continue to adjust that? And it's conversations like this, and it's opportunities like this to hear that from a different mindset and to hear that framed in a different way, to say you can actually be yourself and be really comfortable with your own story and all of the complexities that come with it, be it even if you're only 17, because you've already done 17 years. So acknowledge that.
I think the important thing is, just to bring the point up, is that sometimes we don't know ourselves, and then that's why we're deflecting or we're triggered by other people. And as Lillian pointed out earlier, the younger you can start this process, the better, because as we get older, life gets busier. It's so easy to go, oh, it's too hard to do that. I've got a job, I've got a family, I've got a business, all that sort of stuff. But if we don't take personal responsibility for that process, how do we do that when we can't sit with others, and especially with the diversity of the world? Like, Australia is a very, very multicultural country. It has been forever. So how do we sit with difference? How do we, by first sitting with ourselves and being able to hold our own, basically, as I say, hold our own bullshit, being able to sit and look into the mirror, then we can only sit with others in that same space and not be triggered and seek to deflect or run away from challenges. But that's a part of decolonisation. It's a part of going, hold on, this is what I've been told to do. Those are the steps. But where do I, as a businesswoman, how do I make sure that I'm serving my responsibilities by giving back to others, making sure that I'm not just taking, what am I contributing as well? These are things you need to be able to hold space for. And as you can hear my little goose in the background here.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a baby in the background. If anyone's listening going, what's that extra sound I can hear?
It's being able to breastfeed as a mum and being able to hold that space as a businesswoman, going, at the end of the year I may be coming to Melbourne to deliver some workshops with Gemma and Lillian, and bringing my baby into that space and going, I may have to stand up the front and facilitate while I'm breastfeeding. Now, who's going to be uncomfortable with that? Me, the room, and it's being able to have those skills and modelling them to young people to go, actually, this is the new norm that we want.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's all about that modelling. And And I guess that ties in with my next question for you, Lillian, as an immigrant myself. I immigrated to Australia when I was quite young. But you talked briefly just a moment ago about what your tribe had equipped you with the skills and the support, be it verbally telling you that you had their support, but also whatever else came from the years that you have spent in your tribe. How have you found the challenges to integrate into Australia, and when it comes to young people who maybe have recently immigrated to Australia or have immigrated into a English-speaking, Western, colonized, closed-minded, often unsafe environment, is there something that you've found to be helpful when it comes to sharing those conversations?
So as a Kenyan Australian, I have had to learn a lot of lessons in the last 22 years. Navigating life as a culturally diverse woman has been exciting and also very challenging. I came to Australia at the age of, I think, 19 or 20. And prior to that, I had about 20 years of, as I mentioned before, growing up in a tribe, growing up with a large extended family. And I was part of the Black majority group. And I moved to Australia to pursue my university studies, and my life changed suddenly. All of a sudden, I was in the racial minority and was not equipped to deal with that change.
Yeah,
I had understood colonization, given my country had been colonized by the British for many, many years, and many other cultural groups came through, like the Arabs and the Portuguese. So colonization, I understood that. I heard stories from my family who were impacted directly by colonization. I had to deal with inequity, oppression, their human rights being abused. I also understood racism from an intellectual perspective as well, because studying racism in school, looking at what was happening in South Africa at that time with apartheid, understanding the history of slavery. And then I came to this new world on my own, and I had my whole family, they're all back in Kenya, and I had to create a life on my own. And it was challenging. I didn't really have any blueprint per se to show me how to navigate through life. Yeah. And I struggled for many, many years. Because I felt rejected by people through discrimination, whether it was racism, whether it was racism or microaggression, because I felt rejected by others on a regular basis, I started rejecting myself. And this is what I talk about in my keynotes. I started masking. My cultural heritage all of a sudden was an issue for me. And I tried to mask whatever I could so that I could belong. I was in my tribe. Remember I talked about that sense of belonging. Yeah. I did not have that here. Many years of masking and carrying this burden of not showing up authentically and not embracing who I was. My health and well-being was impacted, and I had to make a change. And I think that was about 12 to 15 years ago. That was a turning point for me, when my relationships were compromised, my health and well-being was basically down the toilet, and I decided to go back to my origins, go back to my roots, go back to the philosophies that have influenced me all my life, and literally about creating a tribe here that made sense for me. A tribe.
And that aligned. Yeah,
absolutely. And also applying things like Harambee, the Harambee philosophy that I talked to you about, looking at what I had in my power, what I had in my hands to contribute, to make a difference, so that the society can be better together. And years since making that change, I have intentionally shown up and contributed with my knowledge, my expertise, my qualifications, my networks, and exercise that Harambee spirit over and over again. And that's what we do with this program, Becoming Better Together. It's really about us showing up and exercising the Harambe spirit so that people create a culture of belonging and respect, not only in their organizations, but also in their community. So my encouragement to young people is look at where you come from. Your superpower can be the thing that you're also rejecting. For me, I rejected my cultural heritage for some time, and now it's serving me. So look at that and find ways to contribute, because your contribution is important to actually creating a humanity that we can be proud of in this century.
Gemma, if you could give some advice to your 18-year-old self, what would it be?
I think for me it would be, don't fight your sexuality and instead explore it would be the first one. I think this idea of get to know yourself before being so fixed on trying to fit in with others that you actually abandon, through the process, you actually abandon the parts of you that you love the most in service of trying to fit into one of those boxes or one of those lanes that sort of society tells you to strive towards. It would be to, not abandon yourself in the process and actually get to know yourself. And one thing that Chantel said in one of our early interactions that has always stuck with me is this idea of belonging to yourself, before you can belong to others. I reckon I just spent so long trying to attach myself to others, like even in primary school, finding a group of friends. Like, it's okay to just be on your own and enjoy your own company and have a few friends, not having the most friends and being popular. Like, I never even realized this concept of like belonging to myself and holding my own self-respect and boundaries. So, I think it would be to try and figure that out quite early as well.
What about you, Chantel? If you could give advice to your 18-year-old self, what would it be?
So much.
We don't have enough time. What's the top thing?
I think, like Jem said, belong to yourself first, because as a woman, as an Aboriginal woman, as a mother, like I belong to so many different groups and so many different roles that I can be pulled in so many different directions. So first and foremost, understanding yourself and all parts of yourself, because my darkness and my shadows are not my enemy. But if I don't learn to embrace them, they can be my destruction and my downfall. Sometimes it's about surrendering to the journey as it is rather than how you want it to be, which is something that I'm learning now and processing. That particularly I had a very difficult birth with my son, which is a completely different conversation. But something a psychologist said to me a few years ago, he said that I kept coming to him with the same problem, and it was about my family. It was, I love them, and every time I go home, I'm showing up for them, but no one's showing up for me. And he goes, maybe it's your unrealistic expectations of your family and situations that is causing you pain, as opposed to the situations. Maybe it's about learning to love people for who they are rather than who you want them to be, and then putting in place boundaries about your interactions with them. And I really took that away and applied it to my whole life experience and output. And it's about accepting reality for what it is and people for who they are, and then working towards a reality that and the experience that I want to have with that person or that situation, and finding the sweet spot in the middle. And a lot of that comes from self-love and being able to show up for myself, because while I was grieving the people who didn't show up, I wasn't celebrating or acknowledging the people who did choose to show up. And just listening to Lillian and Gemma, and they're a part of the tribe that I wish that I'd had a lot earlier, and that I wish that I had in person here. But every time we see each other and we gather, they see me. I can show up in all parts of myself, in what I don't know in business. I've never had a corporate career. I never feel less than in this group. And when that imposter syndrome comes up or that voice comes up, I can speak that truth in this space and have them both go, not here. It doesn't need to be. I can be seen, loved and valued and respected for who I am and what I bring to the table. And I think that's the other advice, is find your inner circle of people that you can be seen and heard and loved, but also held accountable as well. Like people who can go hold you accountable to your own responsibility, but also not hold you in judgment of that. I know that's a big tangent, but that question really
No, I love
I'm
it.
asking myself a lot right now while I'm in this space of just in between so many different spaces.
Definitely. How about you, Lillian? You've talked a little bit about that time of your life, but would there be any particular advice you'd give to your 18-year-old self?
It's basically what Chantel said. If you can create the tribe early, create it now. This is the best time to do that. I lost a lot because it took me a while to create the tribe that I have now. I was not intentional, like Gemma, that sense of belonging and, wanting to fit in. So I compromised a lot of values, my personal values. And so if I had the tribe that I had now, then I'll be in a very different space. So my encouragement would be intentional about the tribe that you create. Curate, like literally, you know how an employer would go through that vetting process and before they hire you, or even just before you allow anyone to come into your house, you need to be safe, you need to know them. Just exercise intention and vet the people that are part of your tribe. And if it's not working, uproot. Deal with that quickly because that can be also very toxic. I think that's really important. So intention about building the tribe and also seeing the tribe as a place that is sacred. It is a sacred space because in that tribe, it's like a well. I talked about that sense of identity, sense of belonging, all of the benefits that we enjoy in Africa being part of a tribe. You can enjoy the same benefits with a tribe that you've curated yourself. And that is also your safe space where you can practice to have those conversations, those awkward conversations. It's your safe space to fail safely. And it's your safe space to practice until you have the confidence. So what we talk about in our program is we have a conversational framework that we show leaders and organizations and individuals on how they can apply that conversational framework to have better conversations. So use your tribe to practice, and then you can go out to the community and be better and show others on how that can be done. So I think that's my advice. Create your tribe and role model that for others so we can be better together.
Well, on that note, I think that our listeners will regardless of what stage they are in their lives, there is a lot to take away from what we've discussed today. A lot of easy things to implement and a lot of things that take a lot of personal work, a lot of that deep self-work that is what we're all supposed to be doing on the journey that is becoming an adult, becoming, a better human, being better together and just doing life as we, continue to do that with our growing pains. I thank you, all three of you, for your time today. And to our listeners, we look forward to sharing more with you on the next episode of Growing Pains. So there you have it. Some really brilliant, insightful words from three powerhouse women who are well and truly working together to be better together. And in addition to that, have taken the insights of their journey, of their learnings throughout their lives in such different ways, like talk about three really different stories, all collectively of a similar thread in the sense of community, in the sense of identifying what works really well, and sharing, those last insights of what they would say to their 18-year-old selves. And I really hope that you have enjoyed today's episode and have taken some insights that you can implement potentially straight away, but also some underlying thoughts that can guide you as you continue to go through what are the growing pains of life and the growing pains of every day and getting older and the constant evolution of us as humans. If you enjoyed today's episode, we would love you to leave us a review and let us know through your podcast app that you are enjoying this series. Please pass it on to a friend. So there's many ways of sharing this. You can share it on social media, or just simply sending this podcast episode to a friend via a message and saying, hey, I heard this and I really think that you might gain something from it, or I just thought it was great. But definitely subscribe to make sure that you don't miss the next episode. And we thank you for your time today, and hope that you get through tomorrow, today, whatever is next for you on the journey with a few less growing pains.